The fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters in the world. The fashion industry actually makes up 10% of humanity's carbon emissions, drying up water sources, polluting rivers, streams, and oceans. And more than 85% of all textiles go into the dump each year. But there are many incredible fashion brands that are tackling this issue head on by creating fashionable, sustainable, and zero-waste products that are making a big impact. Welcome to Business with Purpose. I'm your host, Molly Stillman of stillbeingmolly.com, and this show is all about bringing you the stories behind the brands, companies, and small businesses that are changing the world. Each week, I interview an entrepreneur, CEO, nonprofit director, community leader, or just an incredible person who's trying to make a positive impact, not only through their personal life, but also with their career. My goal is to show you that no matter what you do for a living, you can make an impact wherever you are. My guest this week is Paola Masperi, the founder of Mayamiko. Mayamiko is an ethical, sustainable, and zero-waste fashion and lifestyle brand on a mission to champion a more responsible approach to shopping. Using slow and traditional craftsmanship techniques, Mayamiko works with global artisans from Malawi to Milan to create trans-seasonal women's clothing, accessories, and homeware collections. With a zero-waste policy, the brand utilizes pre-consumer waste reclaimed materials where possible, including cotton deadstock from reclaimed silk, alongside locally sourced artisanal fabric from Malawi, geo-TS certified organic cotton, and linen. Paula is also the founder of the Mayamiko Trust, which helps Mayamikan get up and running with training schemes and microfinance projects, which provide funding and teach basic financial and business planning skills. The trust then connects the trainees to fantastic ethical and sustainable fashion brands and designers. This creates links to markets where they can trade their products as high-value items according to fair trade principles. I loved this conversation with Paula, and I learned so much from her. But actually, before I get to that conversation, there are a couple things I wanted to share with you. One, I have a really fun announcement that I'm actually going to share during the break in the middle of this episode. So you're just going to have to keep listening to get to that announcement. And also, I want to just take a moment to thank our partners of the show that help make this show possible. The first partner I want to thank is Simple Switch. Simple Switch is actually not new to the show because I had the founder, Rachel Coyce, on the show back in the spring. And I actually want you to hear from her a little bit about what makes Simple Switch so incredibly unique.
Thanks, Molly, for letting me hop on this episode. Yeah, we are an online marketplace for ethical and impactful shopping. So an Amazon alternative if you're looking for things to be shipped to your door, but in an ethical way that makes a positive social or environmental impact. I seriously believe that we can shift a bunch of the $600 billion spent online towards companies that are values aligned and that are making a difference in the world. So that's what we're doing.
And Simple Switch is offering a discount exclusively for our listeners. So you can check out the entire marketplace on simpleswitch.org and get 20% off your first order with the code Purchase with Purpose at checkout. That's simpleswitch.org and get 20% off your first order with code Purchase with Purpose at checkout. Also, did you know that I have an ethical brand directory? That's what Chelsea used to start finding products for her boutique almost 4 years ago. Now, Amazuma carries over 50 intentionally sourced brands and is the perfect one-stop shop for all your gift-giving needs. As a thank you to the Still Being Molly community, she is offering 20% off with the code SHOPWITHMolly. Head to shopwithmolly.com for all the details. All right, without further ado, on to my conversation with Paula. Paula, welcome to the show.
Hello, Molly. Nice talking to you.
It is wonderful to speak with you across the ocean. That is just something that over, 200 some episodes in, I do not get sick of that. And just the fact that we can use technology to connect across the world and have a conversation as though we were sitting down with each other having lunch or something.
I know, and a nice cup of tea.
And I know you have your tea. I mean, you're in London, so I feel like, even though you're Italian.
Yes, but yeah. I've adapted to the local habits.
And here I am being very American with my Good and Gather tropical cherry sparkling water.
It's delicious, yeah.
It is. We Americans, do they like sparkling water internationally as much as Americans do?
I'm not sure as much as Americans, but there's definitely, there's definitely enough in the shops. But yeah, nothing beats a cup of tea, especially on a gloomy day like this. We've forgotten summer, it's all gone now.
Yes. No, I was actually thinking about it the other day. I was like, what is it about sparkling water that like Americans like so much? I'm like, because it is everywhere. So I don't know. Anyway, so you're having your tea. I'm having my sparkling water. This is going to be amazing. I have actually followed your work with Mayamiko for, gosh, I don't even remember when I first came across you guys, probably like 4 or 5 years ago. And it's just I just love what you do. So I'm so excited to learn a little bit more about kind of you and the history. So I would love for you to just give the Paola 101. So tell us who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Okay. So my name is Paola. I was born in Milan in Italy and grew up there. Your sort of traditional big Italian family, just one sister, but lots of siblings and, big family gatherings. I come from a fairly feminist family, which I think has sort of shaped who I am. And by that, I mean very strong women in the family, as well as men who have always been very supportive of the women, which, it's sort of, if you think about maybe when my mum was my age, 40, 50 years ago, that wasn't all that common. So I think we sort of got like a really nice sort of feminist, streak in our family. And I've enjoyed sort of the early part of my life in Italy until then when I moved to England to finish off my studies and sort of kind of got stuck here in the nicest possible way. I lived in Germany for a couple of years, and then I lived and traveled across a number of African countries, again for work in the early 2000s. And I think that's where the sort of I guess the seeds of what then would become Mayamiko started to kind of be sown through my work during that time. And it was work on digital education. So it was looking at how we could use digital innovation to support the delivery of education across developing countries, particularly in Africa. And sort of through that work, I got very passionate about the countries that I visited, the people that I met, and the potential that I saw everywhere I looked, and sort of beautiful friendships that came out of that experience then created sort of the roots of what Mayamiko then was to become. So here I am 15 years on, still loving every minute of it. And with the kind of challenges and the excitement that comes with the territory, and running both Mayamiko Trust, the charity, and Mayamiko, the label, at the same time, which sort of keeps me fairly busy.
That's fantastic. Now, I love that you described how much influence your family had on your upbringing and everything that you're doing now. Is your family also involved in a lot of either kind of social entrepreneurship or social justice work, anything like that?
Yes. So I've kind of always grown up seeing these two sides to my family. So there was the day job, and then there was the kind of social engagement part. I think for my mum, it was a bit more hybrid. So she was doing a day job that was also kind of social work, but then on the side did a lot of other projects. Whereas my dad is sort of more of a kind of normal day job, but then in his free time, he was very much involved in culture, politics, social work. So I remember when we were tiny, my sister and I, my dad and his friends opened the first cinema in our town. And we got to see all these movies squashed in one little chair, me and my sister, on a Sunday. But it was sort of a way, I mean, it's quite interesting because I don't actually remember a lot of it. But my dad says that during that time is when drugs had become quite widespread and as a new phenomenon in sort of small Italian towns in the suburbs of Milan where we were growing up, and actually felt like the cinema and the theatre were places where you could offer a safe place to some of the youth that would have otherwise, kind of potentially come in contact with, with these new realities. And so they saw it very much as a way of both bringing culture and diversity and interesting perspectives through the world of cinema and sort of storytelling, but also creating a safe space for the community, for sort of teenagers, and they wouldn't otherwise spend time elsewhere. So it's always been part of our life. So my mum, still now, she's in sort of a mid 70s. She actually just turned 75 not long ago, is still very much active and kind of runs an organization that works with refugees and asylum seekers and help them work through all the paperwork and all the permits. So yeah, it's always been part of life, but I've kind of always seen it alongside a day job. So yeah, so I think that sort of made me realize that I could actually, travel, live overseas, pay my bills, have a day job, and at the same time, in parallel, cultivate more of a passion project, which then became what I am doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I can imagine I have quite a few friends who grew up in, different countries in Europe, and how much, I mean, part of it is just the geography of Europe just kind of lends itself to being a little bit easier to travel, so I love that kind of travel was infused very early on. What initially took you to Africa, and what was the connection there?
Yeah, so I'd always had a passion, and I don't really know where it came from, because to be honest, growing up in sort of suburban Milan in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, there wasn't a lot of diversity in that sense. But I'd always, so my grandmother had a real passion for African artifacts and books and music, and so there was, I think, maybe a little bit of that in the background, but I can't say that it was consciously something that really shaped me, although it was a presence that was there and that I really loved and enjoyed. But I think, so when I moved to London, I worked for an educational company, and we were creating software to, well, initially to teach languages, and then as it grew, it was just educational software. And at the time, we were starting to talk about universal primary education for all through the Millennium Development Goals. And so I think I have been in that job for a few years, and I sort of started growing itchy feet, and I wanted to do something a little bit more.
Yeah.
And sort of one of the suggestions that I made to the leadership of the company was, could we see if any of the solutions that we're working on could apply to an international context, so where perhaps things are different from how they are here where we are. And so through a number of partnerships that we had developed over time, and through corporate social responsibility projects, we started working with governments across a couple of African countries to experiment with them and really try and understand whether that technology could support the delivery of primary education. And that took me to Malawi, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia. Yeah, I think those are the countries that I spent most of my time in, but particularly Malawi and Uganda. And of those two, Malawi even more so. And it was a really formative time for me. I sort of, before that trip in 2003, I hadn't been to Africa. So it was a very formative sort of experience for me. And actually, one of the things I learned very quickly was that I knew nothing. And not that I believed that I knew something, but you kind of think, okay, I've been doing this for a while, I've seen this develop, I've seen this grow, I've got some ideas about it. But actually, very quickly, I realized that I had to kind of park it all and sort of put not just the ego, but like sort of almost like all my past knowledge to one side and be very, very, have a very listening attitude to everything that was happening around me.
Yeah.
And I think that was great. I sort of developed fantastic friendships, experiences, and the projects were good and positive. We got some really interesting outcomes that the local Ministry of Education could use to shape the policies. Yeah, and I think it's, I know you've been to various African countries many times, but for those who might not have traveled to the continent, of course, it's a massive continent. Countries are very different, between each other. But my experience in Eastern Africa is it's one of those places that gets under your skin. You absolutely love it. I always feel, so I spend most of my time in London, but my family are in Italy. But actually, I always have this feeling that whenever I land into an African airport, I sort of feel at home. And I don't know if it's because we are all ultimately from Africa and that feels like sort of that deep reconnection, or, just my huge love for the place. But I have that feeling of, I'm at home, and it's, it's great to be here. So
I have the exact same feeling. So I completely understand. Now, for people who might not be familiar with Mayamiko, Tell us about Mayamiko. What is it? Obviously, we know that it's an ethical and sustainable fashion brand, but what is the heart of it? Where did you get the idea for it? All of that.
Yeah, so I guess maybe unlike other brands that have got a sort of a social impact aspect, we had a slightly different journey. So we started off as a charity and then the brand came after. So in 2008, after having spent some time working on this project, I developed a really lovely friendship with a lady who at the time had been both Minister of Education and Minister for Child and Women Development in Malawi. And it just sort of we started scheming as you do and thinking about what else can we do? Can we, we really enjoyed working together and we had similar values, and across the years we sort of understood that we were on the same page. And so we sort of started thinking about what else could we do to empower women. And we realized that obviously our passion was in empowering women, and we had a similar understanding. We both saw that actually more than anything else, women needed choices, and choices came in different shapes and forms. But the way that we understood choices was access to education and access to other things, which might be opportunities to trade. It might be access to finance. It might be sort of that concept of having access. And so on the back of that, we started Mayamiko Trust in 2008, which is our charity, which is sort of still running. And the purpose of it was to try and provide those choices to women through vocational training, and also through access to fairly paid jobs, because that would then mean access to finance, and that would mean access to a series of other things. But I think we were very clear from the beginning that we were not going to make choices on behalf of women. We were just going to equip them with the skills that they told us they wanted and they needed. And then it was entirely up to them what choices they made with those skills and with those tools. And so at the end of the training that the women do with us, and it's still the same now, they had an option to either stay with us and do an apprenticeship and then eventually be employed by us, or take out a grant option and some microfinance to go and set up their own business. Some of them did that on their own. Some of them wanted to get together in smaller groups and set up sort of smaller co-ops, if you like. But, basically what we had was a very open-minded approach to what choice and opportunity meant, and we were very clear that every woman knew what that meant for them. And so that sort of spirit has remained through the years. So we're kind of now almost 12 years on, so nothing has changed in that approach. But what has changed is that we wanted to offer sustainable income opportunities to women, and that's where the label came in. So after a number of years initially working on the training and skills and sort of quality, we then were able to set up our own brand. And I suppose the desire behind it was that we wanted to create this long-lasting employment opportunities, but also we didn't want to be dependent on aid and donations. Not because there's anything wrong with it, but we just thought actually to close the circle, it would be really good if we had a self-sustaining model that create jobs at the same time. And so sort of the brand kind of came a few years later. First, very timidly, we experimented with a few accessories and, little things like laptop covers and little clutch bags, more than anything, just to test the concept. And I mean, you have to think about, this was like 2012, 13, where tentatively we started all of this. And at the time, there wasn't a huge amount of conversation around ethical or sustainable fashion. I mean, there was a little bit, there were pockets, but it was really, even more niche than it sort of has been in the last few years. And so it was interesting, the sort of the kind of conversations we were having with buyers and shop and customers. But actually, what we realized is that going direct to consumers really resonated, and customers really loved not just the products, but also the stories behind the products. They liked the guaranteed of someone making those products that was being treated well and that was being respected for the crafts and for the skills and for the value as a human, and all that kind of sort of narrative that sort of came with the brand. And so that sort of very baby steps, but sort of reassured us that was the right direction. And sort of, I suppose, the rest is history. We've sort of moved very slowly year by year. I think it wasn't until 2015 that we actually launched a very small women's wear capsule. And then since then, we've been doing broadly a collection a year. So again, very slow, not chasing trends or anything like that, but very much focused on both the quality of the products, their longevity, telling the right stories, and just creating products that people love and treasure for a long time for what they look like, but also for the stories that they tell.
Yeah, there's a couple things in particular that you said that I really want to highlight. And I think it's that important conversation around kind of this distinction, because sometimes there can be a debate about whether or not you should do a for-profit company or a nonprofit, and is charity the right angle? And, in a lot of ways, I very much take the position of, if you can, I think starting a business, a for-profit company is great and the way to go. I am by no means anti-charity, anti-nonprofit. I volunteer and work with a ton of nonprofits. I am on the board for a couple of nonprofits. So that's not what I'm saying at all. I think what you have done is a really interesting approach where you're kind of coming at it from two different angles, and they each have their place. And I think in a lot of ways, kind of nonprofits and for-profit companies can really work together to sort of create this holistic approach to tackling some of these really big global issues. And it's not something that is going to be fixed overnight. It's not something that is going to just magically go away. But when you have different people using different skill sets, different approaches, different tactics, you're coming at it from lots of different angles rather than just trying to be have tunnel vision and not seeing other opportunities around you. And so I think it really does kind of open itself up to really getting to the heart of what is the cause of global poverty. And more often than not, the root issue when it comes to global poverty is a lack of economic opportunity, a lack of jobs. And so one way that you can approach that is to create jobs. So obviously that's not going to be the end all be all, but it's a big part of it. So I think that that's a really important kind of distinction that you made there with what you're doing.
Agreed. And I just want to be very clear. I also kind of believe in both approaches. I think both charities and businesses have got very clear roles to play. So, for example, I don't think we could have started the brand had we not taken the charity approach first, because we really need to put a lot of investment in the beginning, training, upskilling, developing the capabilities to then put us in a place where we could create those jobs and those opportunities. So we wouldn't be where we are now if we hadn't taken that approach. But I am also very clear that business, to be successful, needs to be able to take certain risks. And I didn't want to ever risk any of the charity funding for the business venture. And I think that was really the decision to separate the two out, because I thought, particularly fashion is a very risky industry. You know, there's various statistics out there about how many brands make it past 18 months and all that kind of stuff. But in general, risk is inherent to business. But I was very clear that I didn't want to risk any of the money that was destined for charity projects and for training, for community work, for upskilling, and for all the other initiatives that we run as Mayamiko Trust. And so I think now there's more hybrid forms that are, that you can use. So for example, at the time, B Corp wasn't really a thing. And so, I think times have changed. So maybe if we were doing this now, we might do it differently. But actually at the time, the choice was the charity and the charity's funds should be safeguarded to do charity work. The business should be allowed to take reasonable risk as a business would.
Right.
And therefore, it makes sense to separate the two. And then the two had an agreement, or still have an agreement, where any money that the business makes, it goes back into the charity.
Right.
So it was sort of almost like an additional funding route for the charity. And, now in time, it's the main funding route. But I think those were the thoughts that meant that we sort of separated the two out. And I think it's also, I guess, less confusing as a narrative for people who kind of, learn about us. So there's very clearly a charity and there's very clearly a business that does fashion. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Where did the name Mayamiko come from?
So Mayamiko is a Chichewa word, and Chichewa is one of the languages spoken in Malawi, the main vernacular. And it's a name that is used for both boys and girls, and it means praise or thanksgiving. And other than sounding beautiful and having a beautiful meaning, it was also the name of someone that I worked with, and also their child. And for me, just sort of had a very nice ring to it, and a sort of, as well as the meaning. So
That's such a special, I knew, I was like, I know that there has to be a special story behind it. So I think that that's beautiful.
It's funny, often people think it's Japanese, or they tend to spell it separately, so Maya and then Miko. It's interesting to see what people come up with, but no, that's a true story behind the name.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to take a quick break from this conversation with Paola to share something really exciting and also thank a couple other partners of the show. First, are you one of my loyal listeners of this podcast? Have you ever wanted to sport some business with purpose swag? Well, guess what? You can now get my exclusive Do Something Good with Purpose on Purpose tee through GoX. The design is incredible, but here is the thing. GoX believes in the power of a purchase. They use a simple t-shirt like my Business with Purpose tee to connect their customers with their apparel makers. GoX customers sustain fair wage jobs that liberate workers from poverty and empower them and their families in communities. They are proud to be a verified member of the Fair Trade Federation. You can shop this really incredible, gorgeous, exclusive Business with Purpose, sustainable, eco-friendly tee and more with purpose today at goexapparel.com/Molly Stillman. That's goexapparel.com/Molly Stillman. This show is also in partnership with The Lemonade Boutique, a women's clothing with a cause store. Now, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know I love artisan groups and for-purpose companies like Elegant Teas, Starfish Project, and Rahab's Rope. And what I love so much about today's partner is that the Lemonade Boutique combines some of my favorite for-purpose companies, plus so much more in one easy-to-shop online store. Plus, if you spend $29, you get free shipping. That is a great way to shop. You can shop at thelemonadeboutique.com, where your purchase empowers women to take life's lemons and make lemonade. Listeners of the Business with Purpose podcast can save 15% by using the code PURPOSE15 at checkout. Now back to my conversation with Paola. Obviously, I will just say that, we're saying this knowing that a few things are happening, or, a lot could happen between now and when this airs. But at the same time, like, coronavirus is just the thing that we're going to talk about. COVID-19 is what we're going to be talking about for years and years and years and years to come. I've told my kids many, many times, I'm like, you're living in the middle of history right now. Like, this is not something that is normal. We are going to be talking about this for a long time. We're going to be like, remember that time that we had to wear masks everywhere we went and everything was closed and schools were closed and we couldn't go anywhere. You remember that? And this is something that, obviously is being felt all over the world. And we have had a lot of conversations here on the show in the last few weeks about just, obviously this is something that we really are feeling as a collective humanity. But, I will say I ignorantly in the beginning kind of agreed with the phrase that a lot of people were saying, were like, COVID-19 is the great equalizer. And there was a lot of people that used that phrase. And I definitely used that phrase very early on. And I used that phrase just in pure ignorance of just not really knowing what was lying ahead. And we now know many, many months into this that it is not the great equalizer. And we are seeing statistically that it is reversing a lot of the progress that we had made in terms of people rising up out of global poverty. We're seeing here in the United States that people of color are disproportionately dying from coronavirus compared to other ethnicities. So it is not the great equalizer. We all are experiencing it as a global collective humanity, yes, but our experiences with it are going to be very, very different. And I've had a lot of conversations with my friends in sort of the ethical business space and how those who are running businesses where they are working with, artisan groups, or they have employees that, might be living in developing countries, there is this tension. There's a tension to honor social distancing, to honor all these things. And we understand that people are working from home, and we all understand, everything that we need to do to keep people safe. And we've got to, put our focus on all these things. I mean, we're just being torn in 70 million different directions. But at the same time, we also, there are artisans who are, it's literally life or death, whether or not they get paid.
Yeah.
So it's not just coronavirus, they'll die of starvation before they get coronavirus. So I know that this has been obviously big time top of mind for you. Mayamiko even has an entire section kind of talking about the COVID-19 crisis. So I'd love for you to just kind of share a little bit of what have you guys been experiencing with COVID-19 in Mayamiko, and what are some of the things that you have been doing to put things in place to not just protect the business, but really to protect the artisans and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I think I guess I was more acutely aware of this because of my family being in Italy. And as I think everyone knows, Italy was hit very hard earlier on than, for example, the UK or the US. And so I think my consciousness was aware of this, and it was sort of playing in the back of my mind maybe for a couple of weeks longer. Before sort of things really got bad in the UK, and also African countries starting to also respond to this. So I think maybe I had the advantage of a little bit more time to think about it.
Yeah, I bet.
Basically, but I think so. Malawi responded very quickly. So roughly the same time when the UK entered lockdown, something very similar happened in Malawi. So our training academy closed down. We had to send everyone home, and sort of social distancing was introduced. But as you say, social distancing isn't always possible, or sometimes it's a question of, do you social distance or do you earn a living? And I think that's a very, very real decision that people have to make, everywhere. But, some places it's been sort of more prevalent than others. And, working from home looks very different in different places around the world. And I think the other thing is that obviously busy cities, busy public transport, busy markets, sort of it's all not conducive to social distancing, but these are the sort of the places where people conduct their day-to-day life. And
also just to kind of on top of that point is I had a conversation with a friend who does a lot of work in Kenya as well. And they do a ton of work in Kibera and the Mathare slums. And she's like, you can't social distance in a slum. It's just not possible. It is completely irrational to think that that's even possible. And yet there are people that are expecting people in slums to social distance. She's like, you clearly have never been in a slum. It is not possible. So I think it's a really important point to make.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because this has really shown how, we might all be fighting a same or a common enemy, but the answers need to be really localized. And you kind of at local level really need to own what that response should be, because best, how your people live and what's possible, what's not possible. So for us, I guess we did a couple of things. So we knew that prevention was going to be the main answer, so trying to protect people from actually catching the virus. And I think the government, again, did a really good job closing borders and shutting down airports and monitoring people that had come in from overseas, as sort of potential vehicle for the virus to come in. So the government acted really fast. From our point of view, we sort of asked ourselves a number of questions. Can we social distance within our own four walls in our own workshop? And actually the answer was yes. We could put sewing machines separately, we could give people hand sanitizer, we could give people masks and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose, okay, fine. But actually the reality is that people need to get to work. And the part that was really hard and where we couldn't really protect anyone was on public transport, getting on busy minibuses or, cycling or however people get to us. And so quite quickly we decided that actually we were going to come up with our own version of working from home. So we stopped production of fashion just because we thought that for that, we all love it and we all love making clothes, but actually at the time it wasn't much more important to make masks and potentially hospital scrubs in case the sort of need arises. And every one of our artisans was working from home. So I think there's a few pictures on the website and on social media of our own version of the WFH. So there's a lovely sewing machine in the veranda, and one of our artisans with a mask working from home. And the way we've done is our managers have been kind of sorting out the fabrics and then taking it to the cutters. The cutters have been cutting it, and then we have been delivering to each artisan the amount of work that we would have expected them to do in the normal kind of workshop context. And then a few days later, the managers did the rounds and collected it, QC'd it, and it was ready to go. So, obviously it couldn't have worked with a full-on fashion production, because actually the machines that people have at home are foot pedal, and the stitching isn't of the quality that we need for clothing. But actually for masks, it worked absolutely fine. And it was really empowering that, if you like, things that we put in place 10, 15 years ago when we started with the home working programs, we didn't expect that would come to be such a useful thing in such an unexpected circumstance. So we kept our teams working from home for about 2 months, and they're now just starting to come back. And we have been sort of donating our masks to the local community. And we got a little delivery that we're shipping off the website with a buy one, give one program. And everyone has been massively supportive. And, just sort of, I guess now that masks have become the new normal for everyone, or at least, for the time being, people have been sort of buying them and donating the equivalent. So it's been a positive experience. We as a business haven't really been able to ship for a couple of months because the warehouse that we partner with is a social impact project, and they also kind of, obviously vulnerable people work there, and the absolutely right thing to do was to close down. They're now just starting to open up slowly. Yeah. So for me, it was, well, what do we do? We've got this time, we've got these resources. And actually, we were supported by Build a Nest, which is an organization that works with artisans all over the world. And they helped us get a little fund going to pay for some additional masks, which we donated to the refugee camp, projects that support the elderly, projects that support orphans and street kids. So, we've made the best of this time. I mean, financially, it's been tough, and I think it's been tough on everyone else, but we've managed to keep everyone healthy and as protected as possible. And we now sort of kind of reinvent ourselves again and sort of see where we go from here.
Yeah, I think that it's really great that you guys are just being so thoughtful about it and really not rushing into things, but then also being realistic that this is, these are livelihoods that, they don't have savings accounts. Like, these aren't people who have IRAs and 401ks and retirement funds. Like, I mean, they are, this is the epitome of living paycheck to paycheck, and how detrimental that can be. And so I'm so grateful that you guys are really doing the work, and in a lot of ways walking the talk and kind of putting into action in a lot of ways what you've prepared for years. It's not that for years you were expecting a global pandemic, but when you got here, you're like, okay, we're going to be thoughtful about this. We're going to make sure that our people are taken care of.
And it's really interesting because I think this has really shown how small artisan businesses can be really agile. I think, we have been able, and many others have been able to turn things around very quickly and sort of say, okay, we're going to stop business as usual because this isn't business as usual, and we're going to do something else, which much larger factories and suppliers couldn't really have done because of the way they're set up. And so I think it's really kind of shown how home working, artisan working, independent working really are all sort of signs of agility that us small businesses, can really benefit from, whereas maybe in the past they'd been seen as, weaknesses because they meant that we couldn't grow as fast or we couldn't produce as much, So,
that's a big part of it. Well, this is obviously something that we could talk a lot about. I love the work that Mayamiko is doing. Your products are beautiful. And you're just really, it's just really wonderful to kind of see the growth and the changes over the years. Like I said, I've been following you guys for quite some time. I can't even remember the year that I first found you. So to see that, the continuing of the growth and we didn't even talk about the fact that you guys are, a zero waste company. So you're not only taking care of people, but also planet and really making sure that you are being good stewards of what you've been given to take care of. So I just think it's fantastic. And thank you for the work that you're doing, Paula.
Oh, thank you. It's great it's great to be able to share it with your listeners. So thank you.
Now, this is my favorite part of the show where we transition just a little bit to ask some just fun, get to know you questions. So,
Okay.
Paula, I'm actually very curious for this first question because having grown up in Italy, what was your favorite TV show to watch growing up?
Ooh, okay. So this is so bad, but so it was Knight Rider. But it wasn't called Knight Rider.
Yeah.
It was called Supercar.
Supercar.
Supercar. Yes. So it was. We used to love it. David Hasselhoff rocks anytime.
I love it. So was it just like a dubbed over, like in Italian?
Yeah, everything was dubbed. So the very suave Italian voice, and same for the car. Keith, I think was the car's name. So and it was like, very American and very exotic for us, and we loved it. So I think it probably got to us maybe 10 years after it got anywhere else.
That's hilarious.
But we still thought it was amazing. Yeah. And so we still remember, when David Hasselhoff sang on the top of the Berlin Wall when the wall came down.
Yeah.
And we were only little kids. And, that was like, oh my God, this is like, Michael Knight singing on the top of the Berlin Wall.
Supercar.
Yeah. Supercar.
That's amazing. I love it. Okay. Do you have any guilty pleasures?
Oh my God, Netflix has been a real guilty pleasure of late.
Is there something that you've watched on Netflix during COVID that has been like your favorite?
Yes, so two things that I have been watching before, but I sort of binged on the last series. One is Schitt's Creek.
Schitt's Creek!
Oh my God, it's brilliant. I love it. That's so funny. And then the other one is Frankie and Grace. I love them. I
have never seen
good.
Frankie and Grace, but I've heard it's really good.
Oh, it's very good. I love the way it just sort of talks so deeply, but also lightheartedly about the concept of growing old and growing old as a woman. And yeah, I love it. And the dialogue is so, smart and witty, and both Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin are amazing. So yeah, those two I've indulged in.
That is fantastic. Yeah. Well, I am also a fellow Schitt's Creek fan. Moira Rose is one of my favorite television characters of all time. I love her so much. And I will just sometimes like walk around my house and be like, Alexis, like I don't even have an Alexis in my house, but I just Alexis. Yes. Her vocabulary, funny, yes. It's perfect. Okay.
Oh my God, yes.
Are you a reader? Do you have any books that you're reading right now?
Yeah, so I love reading, but I guess like most people, it's been a tough time for kind of finding the time to actually read. But I have been reading this really interesting book called New Power, and it wasn't prepared, but I just had it by my desk, which is it's nonfiction, and it's looking at how the power dynamics have changed over time, particularly in the last 10 years. So from kind of old power to new power. So, the whole power of social media, the collective, and it's written by the founder of Giving Tuesday, and also I think change.org or another one of the organizations.
Yes, I have heard about this book. A few people have talked about it.
Yeah, it's very good. I'm sort of halfway through, I'd say, and I would really recommend it. It's really interesting. So it sort of looks at how that has affected everything from political decisions to, rebranding of all organizations like Lego that went from being a very old power hierarchical organization to a very new power organization. So yeah, really recommend it. Very good.
Good. Well, all right. Excellent. And now I know it is going to be added to my next nonfiction. I've been kind of not transitioning, but I've been alternating between like, I usually try to read like a good kind of hard hitting nonfiction that's really, educational, really, stretching my brain. Maybe it's something that a new concept or something I'm trying to learn more about. And then I read fiction. So I kind of go back and forth, and I give my brain a rest, and then I give my brain a challenge, and then I give my brain a rest, and I give my brain a challenge. So that's really been, but I'm a big, big, big reader. So that is, I'm always looking for new I kind of devour books. So I'm always looking for something new. So I'm definitely adding that to my list.
Add that to the list, definitely.
Okay. So my last question is, Paola, what does it mean to you to run a business with purpose?
So I think I couldn't do it any other way. I think I've got to the point where maybe with age or experience or, just where to me, it doesn't feel like it makes sense any other way. And I think it's sort of become that entrenched in my identity that I can't see myself separated from it. So, whatever happens to Mayamiko, and, I hope it sort of lives long and thrives. But I think the next thing on my to-do list would be equally purposeful. And I think purpose can mean different things at different stages of your life and different circumstances that you find yourself in. But I think it is what gets you out of bed in the morning. It is what gets you in sort of a sync with the universe so that you feel you are, in the right place. Not necessarily knowing always what you're doing, but giving it your best.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paola, this has been absolutely wonderful to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you again for the work that you are doing with Mayamiko.
Thank you, Molly.
Friend, I would love to know what you loved about this conversation with Paola. Let me know in the comments. Let me know on social media. You can find me at Still Being Molly or at Business with Purpose Podcast on Instagram or Facebook. And you can use the show hashtag, which is Business with Purpose Podcast. Thank you again to our partners of the show, the Lemonade Boutique, Simple Switch, Ama's Uma, and of course, GoX, where you can get the exclusive Do Something Good with Purpose on Purpose tee at goxapparel.com/Molly Stillman. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Be sure to visit the archives for past shows featuring incredible entrepreneurs and business owners who are literally changing the world with their businesses. And if you're a regular listener of the show, thank you for tuning in and week out, and thank you for your support. Be sure to head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Radio Public, and now we're on Amazon Podcasts as well. Basically, wherever you can get a podcast, we are there. Click that subscribe button, the follow button, whatever the button is there. And that way you make sure that you never miss a new episode of the show. And while you're there, would you take a moment to leave a review? Leaving a review helps me and others to know what you're liking and how the show personally is impacting you. This show is produced by the incredible team at Third Wheel Media. Thank you so much for listening, and go do something good with purpose on purpose.